Hey, what's going on YouTube? I'm Dark Jack, and in this video I go 39-0 in the map Raid with a nuclear medal. And in this gameplay what I want to talk about is why video game reviews tend to be overinflated and why reviewers give games scores that they don't deserve. And not all these ideas in the video are my own. Some of them are my own ideas and some of them are things that I've learned over the years from reading articles by other people. Now when you go to a website like Metacritic or Game Rankings, and what Metacritic does is that it takes all the professional reviews for music, for movies, and for games, and it makes an average out of them. So that way, if you go to Metacritic right now, you can see that currently Gears of War Judgment has a 79, and God of War Ascension has an 80. So generally games on Metacritic are between the score of 90 to 60. And movies, on the other hand, are much lower. They're between somewhere in the range of 30 to 70. And so video games receive a much higher score than movies. I think part of the reason for that is that video game reviews use the school grading system. Rather than having 5 be the average, 7 or 8 is the average. And in school, anything less than a 70 is failing. And it's the same thing for video games as well. If people see that the score is really low for a video game on Metacritic, they will not buy the game new. And when it comes to a video game review, there's a whole lot more at stake than a movie, because a video game brand new costs $60, whereas going to a movie, it only costs you $5 to $6 per person. And so generally consumers will not buy a new game if it is lower than 80 on Metacritic. And so the Metacritic review is very important for game sales. And video game reviewers are afraid to give games a low score because they are afraid that they will lose access to their early exclusive videos, which generate ad revenue, because the sites that make money off of video game reviews do so through ad revenue, because people watch their videos on YouTube and they read their articles, and they have ads on both of those, and that is how they make their money. They make money off of ad revenue, and then in return the game company gives them a copy of the game early, so that way they can get the review out first before other people can. So that way their videos and articles get the most views and reads, so that way they can make the most money. And so review companies that give games high scores are rewarded by the game companies, and they are given early access and exclusive coverage for giving high reviews of games. And so essentially this is a bribery, because publishers and developers reward video game review companies that give high scores to their previous games. So because they know that they were given a high score for their previous games, when their new games come out, they're going to have early access to the game, they're going to have exclusive reviews and exclusive content and videos, which in turn is going to draw viewers to their site, and they'll make more money off of ad revenue. And so websites like G4 and IGN are especially notorious for having early access and exclusive content. And IGN is getting an exclusive early review for BioShock Infinite, so they're allowed to lift the date on which they're allowed to talk about it before the websites can do so. And that in turn generates more web traffic, which gives them more ad revenue. And a low score means that the reviewer is going to lose money in the future, because if they give a game a low enough score, the publisher will blacklist them, and they will not be allowed to have access to a copy of the game before it comes out, and they will not be allowed to have early access and exclusives in new videos for the game. And so because the publishers are afraid of being blacklisted by the game company, when they give a low score, what they do is they collude together, and the reviewers talk amongst one another from the different companies. That way they all release a low score together of a game. So when you look at games like Duke Nukem Forever and Aliens Colonial Marines, generally game companies all gave them the same score, a 3.5 out of 10 or a 4.5 out of 10, and they all had the exact same criticisms, as if they had all worked together to give the game a low score, because the reviewers know that the developer can't blacklist all of them, so they all give the game a low score together. And so also game studios are rewarded based on the score. And for the game Destiny that's coming out, which is Bungie's new game, the documents for it were leaked because of the lawsuit between Weston's Impella and Activision. And it was revealed in there that if the game scored a 90 or higher on game rankings, Bungie would receive a $2.5 million bonus from Activision. And what this does is it creates the potential for bribery. And so game companies can potentially bribe the reviewers into giving them higher scores, so that way they'll receive financial rewards. And video game reviews seem pretty pointless now, because because it seems like every single game gets either an 8 or an 8 out of 5 out of 10. So they either get an 8 or an 8.5. And the reason why they do this is because 8 or an 8.5 is not too high that people charge the game reviewer for inflating the score being paid off, but at the same time it's not low enough that the publisher or the game company punishes them for giving the game a low score. So it's like every major release, you already know what the score is going to be. It's either going to be an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. So for example, when you look at GameSpot, which generally gives pretty good reviews, for Tomb Raider, God of War Ascension, Fire Emblem Awakening, Lego City Undercover, Diablo 3, Darkstalkers Resurrection, Assassin's Creed 3, Virtue's Last Reward, MLB Baseball, Black Ops 2, Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, Darksiders, Devil May Cry, and many more. All those games got either an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10, because that is a safe score to give. It's not too high to be bashed for inflating the score or being paid off, but it's not low enough to fear the wrath of the publisher or the developer. And so the score must strike a balance between being high enough to please the publisher, but not being too high that you lose your audience over charges of being paid off or rank inflation. And to give you an example of a score that was bought out by the publisher, EGM's review of Aliens Colonial Marines gave that game a 9 out of 10, which is pretty outrageous. So that developer was, or the reviewer was definitely paid off by Gearbox to give that game that score. So that's one example of how publishers and developers can bribe the reviewer into giving it a higher score than it deserves. And also when you see a review in progress, meaning that the reviewer has not reviewed the game yet after the game has been released, what that means is that the game is going to get a low score, but the developer is paying off the company to hold off the score for a few days after the game comes out. That way that negative review will not affect the sales of the game. And an example of that would be IGN's review of God of War Ascension, and they gave it a 7.8 out of 10, which is much lower than other reviewers. But they held it off for several days because the developer, the publisher, was giving them money to do so. So they weren't bribing them to give them a high score, but they were paying them to not release the score for a while, so it would not affect sales. And also there's the practice of Metacritic bombing and Metacritic inflating, which means that a reviewer will intentionally give a game a low score. That way people will read the review, which will draw more traffic to the website. Because when people go to Metacritic, generally they read the highest review and the lowest review for a game or a movie. And so they will intentionally give it a higher or lower score than it deserves. That way they can generate web traffic to their site and make more money off of ad revenue. And because of these reasons, you're probably just better off listening to the advice of your friends when it comes to whether or not a game is good or not. And if you want to see websites and YouTube channels that are generally unbiased, I think DSP Gaming and his Hateful Truth reviews, those are generally pretty unbiased because he's just giving his honest opinion of the game. He's not being paid off by anyone. And Total Halibut or Total Biscuit, he's the cynical Brit. He's also a well-known YouTuber. He gives his reviews of games, and he is also very unbiased. He just gives his opinion of the game without being paid off. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys later.